Hello, I'm Manawultos, and today I want to talk about the idea that liberty and security are complementary to each other. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that when you have liberty and when you have security, and when you try to increase them, they will in some ways tend to actually work towards increasing each other. And that may sound contradictory to some common perceptions that people have about the concepts, but today I'm going to try to explain to you why I think this is, and why this realization is something that really can change the way you think about politics, about philosophy, and about other things as well. Now, liberty, I'm going to define that today because I think it's very important to define terms if we're going to be talking about these terms. I'm going to define liberty as license to do something, while I'm going to define security as the absence of a particular restriction. Therefore, the insecurity would be the restriction, and the security would be the absence of that restriction. For example, when people talk about financial security, for example, financial insecurity occurs when there's financial troubles. And when you have financial security, it means that you're in a situation where financial troubles don't restrict you. And therefore, this restriction is gone because you have security and you know that things are going to be all right because you've got financial security. In a similar way, personal security, personal insecurity, or personal risk, personal danger is removed when you have personal security. And when you've achieved personal security, that means that those dangers are removed. So, why am I saying that this is complementary to liberty? Well, that's because if you think about it, the restrictions that you have will, in a way, guide you. The insecurities that are in your life will guide the way you behave. And the more secure you are, the less your insecurities will guide your behavior. So if you restrict your insecurities as much as possible, then for your security, you will have more options in how to behave. And what I mean by this? For example, I think a great analogy would be a game of chess. Okay? So we're going to say that insecurity is being in check or being close to being in check. So in a game of chess, you want to avoid being in check and you want to gain the advantage. And if you are close to being in check or you are in check, the number of moves that you can make, the number of options that you have in playing a game are severely limited because you have to worry about that immediate problem. So what you need to do is you need to put yourself in a situation where you regain security, and therefore by not having insecurity, you're able to explore other options that don't deal directly with having to protect the king. And I think that's a great analogy for what I'm talking about, using a game of chess. Because if you're in check, it's going to severely limit your options. Now, going back to liberty, liberty as a license to do something. So, for example, liberty of expression, liberty of speech. The reason why I'm not using freedom is because I'm going to use freedom now, in fact, to describe security as well. So, in my dichotomy here, I'm going to describe liberty as freedom to do something and security as freedom from something, because insecurities make you unfree. Therefore, security is a freedom from something. So now you might be already seeing where I'm going with this. You might be seeing where it makes sense that these things are complementary for each other. Because in a psychological perspective, let's say Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, represents this. Security is something that is generally important for people. People want to be safe. People want to be in a position where they don't have to conquer their tomorrow. Because if you have an uncertain tomorrow, if you don't know if you're going to live to the next day, that is going to really motivate you to conquer your tomorrow. And therefore, having that security means that you don't have to conquer your tomorrow. And if you don't have to conquer your tomorrow because it's already available to you, you can do something else. Now, here is where you get a big divide between liberals and socialists. Liberals tend to favor liberty, uh, and pushing liberty more, because the idea of having more license to do various things seems like it then allows people to give themselves safety. In other words, for example, the idea of, for example, a well-armed populace is an idea that for liberty you achieve a degree of security. At the same time, people that are in favor of gun control believe that through security you achieve liberty. And what I mean by that? What I mean by that is that they consider the idea of a lot of people having weapons as being dangerous, and therefore that's an insecurity. And when I say insecurity, by the way, let me just emphasize this if it isn't already obvious. I'm not talking about emotional insecurity. I'm talking about pragmatic insecurity, as an insecurity in the sense that you have a situation that makes you unsafe and that therefore forces your behavior to change to accommodate it, sort of like being put in check. So they consider that an insecurity for them. So by getting rid of the armed populace, they then feel safer, which allows them to worry about other things. So, in other words, what I'm saying here is that people that favor liberty as a means also to gain security, and people that favor security also as a means to gain liberty. So what I'm saying here is that the two approaches are not actually that far apart if you're only looking at ideas of liberty and security, because they complement each other. Now you might say, well, there's going to be a curve, okay? Because classically people would say that it's let's say, a simple line. If you have a graph with absolute security on one axis and absolute liberty on another axis, you would expect as liberty goes up, security goes down. As security goes up, liberty goes down, and it produces essentially a straight line between the two axes. That, of course, goes diagonal. Now, when you consider the idea that they're complementary, you might be inclined to believe that instead, perhaps, it's actually more a curved. It's a curved line. It's a curve. So, obviously, when you get maximum liberty, you're not going to have any security, or if you get maximum security, you're not going to have any liberty. But in between, there might be a growth between the two, and that's what causes a little bulge, a curve to occur. But consider a tyranny, okay? Consider a tyranny. Who is the most secure person in a tyranny? And ask yourself then, who is the freest person in a tyranny? And more often than not, you'll end up with the same answer. It's the tyrant. The tyrant is simultaneously the freest and the most secure person. And when you contrast that tyranny with a country that is not tyrannical, you'll find that that tyrant is simultaneously more free and more secure than any person in a liberal or otherwise society could ever hope to achieve. So what you see is that instead it actually produces a point where maximum security and maximum liberty are actually the same. Because if we assume that security is freedom from something, such as freedom from X concern, freedom from Y concern, freedom from something else being incumbent upon you, and you put that and you maximize it, what you have is essentially a situation where someone has zero accountability. There's no one to hold you accountable. There's no sort of Damocles. There's nobody who's going to overthrow you. So what you end up with is, I think, also a situation of absolute liberty. Because if there's no restrictions on the kinds of things that you can do, then obviously your license to do things is unlimited. And that's where you get, I don't think that this has 100% ever been achieved by any person, but if you go to, let's say, Nero in ancient Rome or Stalin, what you have is two people that had a large amount of security and simultaneously a large amount of liberty, and they did things that otherwise would not people would not want to do. People would think that they'd get in trouble for doing. For example, Nero, when he did the plays and he forced people to attend and people weren't allowed to leave until the play was over. That's something that is very tyrannical, but it's also something that shows a great amount of freedom and a great amount of liberty and security on the part of Nero, because by doing something that would otherwise be absurd, by doing something that other people would usually be heavily critical of, but that he can get away with. Now, of course, he didn't ultimately get away with it, but he got away with it significantly enough for it to be a situation where, while he was doing it, there wasn't a huge risk of any consequences for it. He got away with it. And is that not the fullest show of liberty and security that you could ever imagine? Same thing with Stalin, when people were clapping for him, and they were clapping and they were clapping, and they didn't want to stop clapping because they weren't very secure, but he was very secure, and they knew that whoever stopped clapping first could get a big punishment. So in that way, you see, security and liberty, when they're maximized, produce a situation where those kinds of things can happen. Now, of course, it's maximized for one person in that situation. So you eventually reach a point where if you treat people as equals, you can't actually maximize both of them, because when you get to a point where you ask yourself, should I be at liberty to kill people without any, let's say, criminal causes, for example. Let's say someone didn't commit any crimes. Should I be at liberty to kill people arbitrarily, randomly? That then reduces somebody else's safety. So you see, there is a trade-off, but the trade-off isn't for the individual. The trade-off is for society. The trade-off is for the community. It's not a trade-off in the individual level. And I think that's something that people are missing, is that liberty and security on an individual level are not a trade-off. And that's why the tyrants have the greatest security and the greatest liberty. Because if you have a maximal amount of security, then the insecurities, the things that would normally force you into certain sets of behaviors, don't exist. And what happens is you're able to behave and to actualize your character to the fullest. People that have the greatest amount of security and therefore no insecurity are able to behave fully in character. So when I look at Nero and when I look at Stalin, I don't look at people that I think are necessarily unusual persons. When I look at them, I look at them as people that have achieved something that a lot of people think they want, but that actually, if they got it, would actually lead to a negative outcome. And I'm not saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, because I don't think that's true. What I think is true is that, as I said, it's about the actualization of a character and the restrictions that people have, the insecurities that people have, are in a way what keeps people from behaving in the way that Nero and in the way that Stalin behaved, where people follow their whims more freely, where people don't have to worry about other people's opinions. They don't have to worry about getting in trouble for what they're doing. People behave very freely and very securely. And and therefore what I think is true is that everyone has the potential to be Nero. Everyone has a potential to be Stalin. Everyone has a potential to be Hitler. But what's different, in my view, from the idea of power corrupting is that, in my view, we're already there. We're already at that point in our characters, and what's keeping us from going to the extreme is not that we are uncorrupted. What's keeping us is that we are not free and we are not secure. And because we are not free and because we are not secure, we have to behave in a way that restricts us and forces us to behave out of character. Now, of course, I'm not saying that there doesn't exist character development. I'm not saying that everyone would behave like Nero or like Stalin. What I am saying is that the little character flaws that you have become very huge and much more apparent when you have power over others, when you have security and when you have liberty and you put it to the maximum degree. So that's how liberty and security are complementary to each other. And that's why, in my view, liberty is not a virtue. Liberty, in my view, is something that sure is desirable. It's something that people want. It's a tool. I think it's something that, when creating a government in the real world, liberty, in my view, is very important and something that is very useful. But I would never consider liberty a virtue. Liberty is only a virtue to someone who is perfect, to someone whose character, when fully released of all constraints, is immaculate. That is when liberty becomes a virtue. Liberty cannot be a virtue otherwise. Now, that being said, I'm not against liberty. I'm very pro liberty, but I think it's very important for people to take this as a warning. Okay, at one point, to build a bridge of understanding so that liberals, socialists, monarchists, various groups can understand each other and can understand that in different ways we're approaching different issues. We're approaching the same problems people have, the same problems of people seeking to conquer their tomorrow. Those are problems that everybody is addressing in some way. The problems of what if someone becomes too powerful, the problems of what if the people do something weird in general. That's a problem too. And problems of how do we deal with natural disasters? How do we deal with foreign invasions? What if the bureaucracy becomes corrupt? Those are all problems that everybody needs to think about. And I think it's important to build a bridge of understanding, to understand that when some people favor safety or security and some people favor liberty, that in many ways they're approaching the same problems but in different ways. And I think it's very important to build a bridge of understanding there. And it is also warning so that people know that when you gain power, when you gain liberty, when you gain security, don't expect that that will automatically make people better persons. Don't expect that people will automatically become better. Because all that does is it removes limitations, it gives greater license to the actions that people are able to take. And what that produces is a society that is based on the character of its people. And therefore, it is very important to understand the character of the people and to build a society that does not lead to destruction of itself. A society that is stable, a society that can last. And that's why I'm a Coinonist, but that's a different story. So anyway, tell me what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there a particular point that you would like me to discuss? Feel free to leave comments in the comments section below. Donate to me on Patreon if you think that what I've said is worthwhile. And share with your friends, share with people that you think would find this interesting. So thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing you all next time on Wultus Over and Out.